All right. Hello, this is Ron with Sound Car Services, and this is going to kind of part two of a video I shot just a minute ago about reverse. I'm going to discuss a little bit about the shift jig. This shift jig was purchased from Weddle. It's actually an 091 bus transmission shift jig, and I had a machine shop in Temecula machine it out to fit the larger pinion assembly and the hole enlarged for the larger main shaft that the 2D runs compared to the 091. Right now I'm running my input shaft on his cluster as a tool to be able to spin it and check it. But I get a lot of questions about how you tear them apart and how you put them back together because people want to do them by themselves, and it's not super difficult to build a 2D, but if you're doing it without a shift jig, there's so many things that can go wrong that can cost you huge amounts of money with gears and everything else that can get broken. So I just kind of want to go over a little bit of why this shift jig is so important. So basically what's happening right now is when I'm in the shift jig, I'm simulating with the gear carrier housing, and that's what this is. It's a GCH, and it basically is exactly what it is. It says it is. It carries the gears. But if I unbolt the two nuts here and the two nuts that are holding the pinion in, this whole thing comes off, and it's the complete gear cluster that's in the 2D when you're driving it. Basically what I'm trying to get at is that the gap between this flange here and this flange here needs to be the same exact measurement that you have on your 2D. If you were to see on this side over here, come around here real quick, you see I've actually got washers that are spacing the bar, the actual spacer bar that Weddle sold me. I actually put washers in there because this gap needs to be the same exact gap that the depth is in your transmission. Otherwise this whole thing is for naught. Go ahead and go back to where you were, please. And then so what happens is when you put this whole thing together, it's when they call it a shift jig, but it's not just about making sure that your shift points are in the right spot. That is critical to make sure that you get reverse lined up properly. About 50% of the transmissions that I do, reverse isn't adjusted properly. It's working, but it's not. The gears aren't centered and they wear prematurely, or they'll knock on one of the other gears. But the more important thing, and you won't find out about it until you put the transmission together, is if you don't have the right shims on the main shaft and you don't have the assembly put together properly on the pinion shaft, when you go to bolt this in, it may look good when it's sitting on your bench without a shift jig and everything will move, and then you'll heat the case because you have to heat the case to be able to press this pinion in. Once you heat the case and you slide that in and you get everything bolted up, you'll go to move this like I'm doing right now, which is nice, and it's got a little bit of tension on it, which is exactly what I want. But I in the early days when I was trying to mess around without a shift jig, I'd put a transmission together and this would be locked up. It wouldn't even move, and I'd have to pull the whole thing back apart, and finally this is what saved me. So this is really important. If you can find a way to make a shift jig and be able to get this spacing and the gears completely parallel with each other where they're not too far up and too far down, that's kind of what's important. Come on in here and let's see if we can show them. So the main shaft, you've got first gear, second gear, third gear, and then the fourth gear on the main shaft, which is the top shaft. Okay, third gear and the synchro for third gear. The synchro for that actually sits, see if I can get my head out of the way and still be able to point it. This is the third gear on the pinion shaft, so it's the driven gear. And there's a gap right here between it and the synchro. It's actually the cone, but the synchronizer and the cone for the third gear on the pinion, there's a very, very tight gap right there, and then there's another one of those gaps in here that you can't see. And if you don't get the preload shims that are behind this bearing just right, you're allowed, I think, plus or minus like, I don't know, 5,000ths of an inch, maybe 10,000ths of an inch. If you get it too far forward or too far backwards, the cone will actually bind on the next shaft, and that'll keep this from turning. And if you were to put that in your car and drive it, you're talking catastrophic destruction inside of it. So the shift jig is super important to have. If there's any questions I can answer for you that I didn't address, you know, first gear is your center shaft right here on the back. This is your shift linkage. So when you're pushing your hockey stick in, I guess I'll show you guys that real quick. Let me grab a hockey stick. Okay, sorry about that. My poor wife wants me to get this over with because I'm sure she's tired. So this is the hockey stick. This is what goes through your nose cone. This is what your linkage goes to. So come around here and we'll show them basically what they're doing. So when you're in neutral, and these are centered, your hockey stick sits in here. And as you move your shifter side to side, what you're doing is you're selecting that one, or the reverse gear, which is the one on the bottom. That's all you're doing, is picking which one of these you're going to be in. If you go to reverse and you pull back, then that puts you into reverse. You push forward and it takes you out of reverse. This would be, first gear would be the center one in, second gear is the center one out, and then third gear is the top one in, and fourth gear is the top one out, and then neutral's in the center. So when you're shifting your transmission, this is what you're doing. This is the reason why I like to go with the updated hockey stick that's got the bat wings welded into it, because if you speed shift like I do, there's a chance that you can kind of bend all of this up. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it really makes for a bad day. And you know what? Real quick, let me grab... This is the bearing that came, the forward bearing. This is an updated forward bearing that came out of the transmission, the E-box that I just finished. Hear that? So there's a spot on the inside of the race in here that has a hole in it. It just, from the metal, got hot and came apart. This was the majority of his noise. And I believe this was caused because he ran the wrong oil in the transmission. It was it basically looked like red ATF. It was probably, with my guess, I would probably guess it was the red line oil, but I don't know 100% for sure, but I'm pretty sure that the lightweight oil is what caused that. So make sure you guys run 75-140 and a good quality oil, and go from there. Thanks for watching.